I'm concerned about the implicit bargain that consumers are being asked to ratify, by which they get supposedly free services, but actually have enormous amounts of personal data extracted from them without knowing what exactly is going on. And Mr. DeVries, I'd like to begin at least with you and your company, the largest, arguably most powerful company in the world. I note in your testimony, your written testimony, you say for over 20 years now, our flagship products have been free. And then you go on to say, next paragraph, that Google clearly explains how it makes money and clearly explains how your products use personal information. And my question is that really true? Are any of those statements actually true? So let's take some examples. Let's start with location tracking. Let's start with your Android phones. Do you think the average consumer would be surprised to learn that her location is recorded and sent to Google hundreds of times every day, even when she is not using her phone?
Thank you, Senator. I do think we take as strong an effort as possible to try to explain these things clearly. I understand that it's complicated the way a mobile phone works.
Do you think that she would be surprised to learn that even when she's not using the phone, an Android phone, Google is receiving information about where she is? For instance, it's every 4 minutes or 14 times an hour, roughly 340 times during a 24-hour period. That's without use of the phone. Do you think she'd be surprised to learn that?
So, Senator, I know that location information is absolutely core to making a mobile phone work the way that you want it to work. It's what makes maps work, it's what makes your phone calls be able to be routed correctly. And we have an optional service that's opt-in called Location History, which can collect location over time if people turn that on. I think there's more that we can do to explain location more clearly, and I've heard your concerns.
Well, Google collects geolocation data even if location history is turned off, correct?
Yes, Senator, it can in order to operate other services.
Let's just get that on the record. Google collects geolocation history and information even if location history is turned off. Do you think that an average consumer, let's say a teenager with an Android phone, would be surprised to learn that Google is tracking his location even when location services are turned off by scanning Wi-Fi networks around him throughout the day? Do you think he'd be surprised by that?
Senator, I know that this data is used to provide value back to the user, to make their phone work.
You're not really answering my questions. You're telling me you don't think a consumer should be surprised? You think they should anticipate that? They have location services turned off.
This is fascinating. What value are you talking about?
Well, Senator, so in order to make, say, maps work, to be able to locate you, to give you directions where you go, maps needs to know where you are.
The phone's off.
Well, in order to be able to just perform basic functions to keep itself.
Location services are off.
Indeed, Senator, in order to be able to know where it is so it can route phone calls to you, so it can collect the basic information.
So the consumer cannot meaningfully opt out. I mean, he has gone and tried to turn location services off. He's not using his phone. It's still communicating and sending information to you. And you're monetizing it and using it to direct ads at him, correct?
We are not using that information to direct ads at him, no, sir. This is to provide value back to the user in terms of making their services operate.
Wait. You don't use the information? What do you do with that information?
We use it to make sure that we understand.
It's not of monetary value to you?
There is some ways that location can be used for ads. So, for instance, your IP address.
Well, I thought you just said it wasn't used for ads.
Senator, there's the kind of geolocation that's sent from the cell towers, from your GPS device, that's used for purposes that are really about making the phone operate. I'm happy to explain this in more detail. I understand it's a complicated topic and we could communicate it better. And
I don't know that it is that complicated. I think when somebody turns off their user information, their location history, they expect the location tracking to be off. But it's not, in fact. They don't have a way, apparently, to turn it off. Let's take another example. Do you think that an average consumer who's using your products fully understands that Google builds a profile about her, tracks where she goes to work, tracks where her boyfriend lives, tracks where she goes to church, tracks when she goes to the doctor? Do you think that an average consumer would anticipate that?
Senator, I know that we have a duty to communicate this information clearly. I don't believe we track the information at that level without communicating.
Do you think you're communicating it clearly when a consumer cannot turn off their location tracking?
Senator, you can turn off location tracking. There are aspects of location, though, that are necessary to make services work, where if we turn those off, your phone wouldn't work the way you'd expect. And I know that's a complicated subject to explain. It is. And we're trying hard, and we are hopefully have
it's not complicated. What's complicated is you don't allow consumers to stop your tracking of them. You tell them that you do. You would anticipate that they do. A consumer would have a reasonable expectation based on what you've told them that they're not being tracked, but in fact, you're still tracking it. You're still gathering the information, and you're still using it. By the way, all of this is just phone. We're not even talking yet about search or internet tracking. I mean, listen, my time has almost expired here. We could talk about the internet tracking that Google performs. We could talk about the lack of consent. Here's my basic concern, is that Americans have not signed up for this. They think that the products that you're offering them are free. They're not free. They think that they can opt out of the tracking that you're performing. They can't meaningfully opt out. It's kind of like that old Eagles song, you know, you can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave. That's kind of what it's like dealing with your company. And that's a problem for the American consumer. It's a real problem. And for somebody who has 2 small kids at home, the idea that your company and others like it are sweeping up information to build a user profile on them that will track every step, every movement, and monetize that, and they can't do anything about it, and I can't do anything about it, that's a big problem that this Congress needs to address. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.